Everyone, it's Strange Michael. I hope you're doing well today. I finally finished reviewing and watching all of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. I figured I'd go ahead and finally do the ranking video. It's a Sunday right now, so happy weekend, happy Sunday, whatever. It's very rainy outside. There's a window right here. You might be hearing some rain, I don't know, in the quiet parts of the video. It might get louder, I don't know. It is Virginia. Anyway, it has been raining a lot, so it might be a lot worse. Anyway, so, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series, there are 9 of these movies. 9 of them. And there are 2 prequels in here. There's a lot of requels that are like direct sequels to the original. There's a lot of soft reboots between the first 2 or 3 sequels, as a matter of fact. You have a remake in here. You have kind of a requel, remake, sequel. You have so many things to talk about with the series that, to me, overall, my beginning review for this series is that most of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series are bad movies. Most of them. A lot of them are just plain out sloppy and messy films, bad movies in general, that to me don't deserve the moniker or the title of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The series started in 1974, as many of you know, 4 years before Halloween was around. 4 years before Michael Myers was around, quite a few years before Jason, quite a few years before Freddy. Leatherface is not as well beloved as those 3 icons, and yet he was before all of them. That's how weird this whole thing is. You know, I don't think anybody ever puts that into context when they make videos about this, but it's true. He's kind of a forgotten character that really isn't appreciated or taken care of all too often, which is kind of sad because it's one of the best films of horror. It's one of the things that started the subgenre of horror that is slasher, you know? It's kind of sad to see how Texas Chainsaw Massacre has been treated ever since Part 2 came out, because I don't like that movie. It's a shame, in my personal opinion. As I said, many of these are going to be bad, in my opinion, or just kind of bland, for the most part. Most of the films, I feel like, are just decent. Like, right at average. Sometimes, most of the time, underneath average, for me. And in case you haven't seen my channel before or heard my reviews for these movies separately, if this happens to be the first ever video you've ever found from me, I'm going to have a very controversial take. Because there's a lot of these movies people really like that I don't in the fan base. I'm not really a fan of these, if I'm being honest with you. And hopefully you'll stick around. Alright, so 9 movies. We're going to start off with the very worst of the bottom. By the way, there are 2 of these movies I do not have on physical media. One of them being the Netflix film from 2022. The other one being the previous straight-to-video film, Leatherface, from 2017. I do not own either of those. I might buy Leatherface, though. I don't know. Anyway, so let's start at the bottom. My number 9 pick for the absolute worst of the series should not surprise anybody. Many of you who saw my review for some of these other movies might think that I might have put one of those at the very bottom, but I think most people in all of society, horror fans, non-horror fans, would agree that the worst movie of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films happens to be the one that stars 2 of the most notable names from the entire series, and that would be Texas Chainsaw: The Next Generation, which is technically Part 4. Again, a soft reboot from Part 2 and 3. It is awful. It's absolutely horrible. It's just a goofy-ass, no one gets killed with a chainsaw type of movie. It has nothing going for it at all. Leatherface starts cross-dressing. It is the epitome. Kind of like Halloween Ends. And kind of like Friday the 13th Part 5, even though I really like that movie. I'm one of the few that takes a series, takes a character, and really just doesn't know what to do with it. This is directed by the guy that was the co-creator with Tobe Hooper on the original film. Yeah. It's bad. It is unbelievably awful. There are no words for how horrible this movie is. Matthew McConaughey is really fun to watch in it. He steals the show over Leatherface because of how poor they took care of poor Leatherface for this movie. It is a shame, in my opinion, how horribly he was treated for this film. Moving along, though, you know what? I need to take my phone off of the low power setting so I can actually keep it on. Moving on to the next pick, my number 8 pick, the next worst. It's one that should not surprise you. This film is the OG sequel, and that is Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, or called Part 2. This came out 12 years after the original film in 1986, and I fucking hate it. This is the second time I watched it. The first time I ever saw it, I hated it. I thought it was bad then. And it has moments that are okay in here. Of course, it has Dennis Hopper playing in it. I really like him. The radio host girl in it, Stretch, I really like her. But outside of that, I fucking hate this. I love Bill Moseley. He plays Crop Top. I keep trying to call him Crop Top. Chop Top in the movie. And even he couldn't save this. Leatherface is goofy. Chop Top is goofy. Tobe Hooper directed this, by the way. And he, at this point, was trying to talk about how the original film was supposedly a comedy, which I think he's an idiot. It's not true. It's not a black comedy of any sort. I don't get where people are coming from when they claim that. Just because Tobe Hooper said it doesn't make it true. I don't care if he is the co-creator of it. I hate Part 2. I think it is truly awful. I think it's one of the worst sequels, being, at the time, the only sequel to the original film. If I had only had these two movies, and if I had seen this for the first time ever in 1986, this would have felt like The Last Jedi to people, I think. In my opinion, it would have felt like it to me, at least. It feels like such a... It tries to go such a comedic route that it feels like a slap in the face to people who love the original movie. This is embarrassing. I hate it. I don't want to talk about it. Pretty good music, sometimes, but, no. Moving along to my number 7 pick. This film I saw for the first time ever for this review. I am referring to the uncut version. I don't know the difference between the R-rated and the uncut. I do own these two in this box set. Or set, whatever. Anyway, my number 7 pick, I want to make sure I got the number right. My number 7 pick is Leatherface, the OG Leatherface film, not the 2017 movie, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3. This one ignores the events of Part 2 pretty much. And I actually think this one has more positives than negatives to it, but it feels kind of cheap. It feels kind of straight to video in a lot of ways. Not to mean that as an insult, but at the time in 1990 when this came out, that wasn't a compliment once upon a time. But in this case it was. I think it's a pretty decent flick. Has some really good gore in the film when you see some of the kills and whatever that aren't really typically done with a chainsaw. Leatherface looks a lot better than he did in the horrible way that made him look in Part 2. I had forgotten how awful he looked in that film until I rewatched it for these reviews. But Leatherface here looks mostly better. He looks like a WWE guy. I can't figure out which one I think he looks the most like. Kind of like Kane when he wore like that leather contraption shit on his face, but overall, Leatherface is not a bad film by any means. It's kind of, I'll be honest with you, and I talked about this with some of my friends in the comments. I've kind of, since I watched this about a week or so ago, I've slowly forgotten more and more what the plot was of this film. And I don't know if it's old age, it kind of scares me a little bit, but I think it's just kind of forgettable overall. I think it's just kind of a forgettable plot for a movie that I didn't hate at all. I thought this was mostly decent, and I thought I would put it a little bit higher on my list, but I didn't, which is kind of surprising, because some of the things I said about some of the other movies, but a lot of their filmmaking aspects were either more entertaining to me, which made them better than this, or they had better gore effects, or more gore, or something like that will put some of these other projects above this movie for me. But overall, this is not a bad movie. This is just a solid flick that has some good things in there. It's fairly watchable, I would say, but it's not super memorable, like I said, which is why I went ahead and moved it down kind of lower on the list for me. Moving along to the number 6 pick here. This one I thought would for sure be in the bottom 2 or 3 until I rewatched Part 2 and then saw Part 3 for the first time. This movie I did a review for, of course. That's why I didn't include it on my recent reviews for these movies. I'd already reviewed it last year when it came out, 2022, and that is the requel of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's all the title is. It is trying to cash in on this idea of being like Halloween 2018, or Halloween Kills, or Halloween Ends. It's trying to do that. And for the most part, I don't think it's a complete loss. It has some really great kills in there, some really great moments that make you feel for Leatherface, but my biggest problem with most of these films are that when they try to make Leatherface into an anti-hero, instead of the villain who is a fucking cannibal who eats people, I have an issue, right? Like, I love Venom from Spider-Man. I do. He's not a good guy. You could argue he's not even an anti-hero. But when he's villainous, they make him villainous. When he's not, they don't. You can't do that route. You can't have you can't pick one option over another when it comes to Leatherface. He has always been, canonically, a cannibal who fucking kills people. Kills strangers, too. That is from the OG 74 movie. I don't care what anybody says, you can't have him be an anti-hero. I don't like it. The 2022 film tries to do that, and I think it fails in the same way that a film almost 10 years previous called Texas Chainsaw 3D did. So, bad choices after bad choices make bad movies, in my personal opinion. And this is no change. This is no change. The 2022 film looked good. I didn't hate the cast of kids. I couldn't stand the one chick in here who was a total SJW and just bitched about politics the entire film. That is one of the worst cases of a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film. Why, of all things, you'd bring politics into this is annoying. I think it was either the remake or the prequel to the remake that did that as well, with R. Lee Ermey's character talking about, like, global warming and shit. Why? Why? But it's annoying. The film talks way too much about, like, gun rights and shit in a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film. Really? It's just... Stop. Netflix, stop. Stop doing shit like that. I think the film was a little too long, too, and the ending is awful. Moving along, though, to the next pick on my list. Number 5. I almost said 6, but number 5 is Texas Chainsaw 3D, or as it's now known on DVD release, just Texas Chainsaw. I slightly like this better than the Netflix film, obviously. I like the look of Leatherface more in the 2022 Netflix film, more than here. He looks awful here. But the film itself had a cool concept of this girl who has a grandmother she never knew about passing away. She gets an inheritance letter, whatever. Alexandria Daddario plays her. She's beautiful. She and a couple of friends go out to Texas to go see what this house is like when she finds out she's adopted. And the house is beautiful. It's the original house from the original film. There's such an attention to detail at the beginning of this film where they kind of recreate the same day that the first film ends in 1974. The problem with this movie is that, again, people can't figure out when things take place, what time frame it's supposed to be. If you're assuming that the timeline makes sense, it should be, by the look of the people, like 20 years later, like 1994. It is not at all. This is like 2013. They make it very clear that that's the case. People have cell phones. People are using things that are kind of similar to FaceTime. And yet, it's supposed to be like the 90s or something. The timeline makes no fucking sense in this film. As I said in my review, Adam Marcus, who made and directed and wrote Friday the 13th Part 9, I think, Jason Goes to Hell, he helped write this movie. So I blame him, automatically. Above everybody involved, I blame him. But at least there's no woke politics in it, which made it even better. And again, the gore was in here, and it was kind of cool. The practical effects looked really good. There was quite a bit of CGI gore, and I'm not a fan of that at all, as many of you know. I think it kind of ruins the impact of a lot of kills in horror films, or just movies in general, you know? But in here, I think that it most of the time had practical effects, and I think most of the time they were super effective. But I think that it still deserves that number 5 spot. Moving along to the next film. This number 4 pick is one that I do not own, which you can probably nail it down which one that is now. That is the 2017 film, 4 years after that 3D film, called Leatherface. The second film to be called Leatherface in this series, the second film to be a prequel, and this film, to me, as I said in my review that I uploaded right before this, even though it took me a couple of days to record this video, after that video, I really like the movie. I think it's got its flaws, the characters aren't that strong, it's got a plot twist in here that's kind of, you know, unconventional that a lot of people really didn't like, but I've never hated the movie. I've seen it one other time before, and I really liked it then, and I like it now. I think it's a good movie, I think it has a lot going for it. In some parts of it, I like it more than the remake and the prequel to the remake from 2006, but most of the time I think those two films are better. Obviously, because of the list. This movie is so unfairly hated for how beautifully shot it is, how well acted some of the characters are, like Stephen Dorff's character, who is like a sheriff, and then you have a couple of crazy nutcases that help break out of the asylum. This does not deserve, as I said in my review, to be called a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, nor a movie called, in this case, Leatherface. This is not that. This is a prequel before he even becomes Leatherface, with the mask and the chainsaw and all of that. This is about a kid getting taken away from his family, the Sawyer family in this case, getting locked away in an insane asylum, eventually breaking out in the middle of this crazy crisis that happens in 1955, I believe. And then it kind of turns into like a road trip film. So it's kind of like a breakout movie and then a road trip movie mixed into one that happens to have horror elements and a reference to a character that you know of as a horror icon, which would be Leatherface. That's really all it is, and I don't think it deserves to be a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film. As I said in my review, I think the title should have just been Jed, as in Jedediah Sawyer. That should have been it, because the film would have, I think, pissed people off less, but it still would have. But I think with the title Jed, and not Leatherface, where you would assume he'd be killing people, I think people would know what they're getting into. They would know because of the internet that it's a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, but it's not a bad movie by any means. I don't understand what people are unfairly hating about this. It just seems completely ridiculously unfair, in my opinion. But that's just me. That's just Strange Michael whining a little bit. Moving along, though, to the top three. The top three. I'm going to take a sip of drink really quick while I'm thinking about it. Top three. I gotta say, after some thought, some heavy thought, about the top three and about where I would place these films on, like Leatherface that I just talked about in number 4 on my spot, I gotta be honest with you, I settled on this. My number 3 pick is gonna be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Beginning, the prequel to the remake from 2003. This is 2006 when this came out. This is the first one I ever saw in theaters. And it's not a great film. There are people in here like Jordana Brewster from the Fast and Furious movies that I just think kind of suck. A lot of the acting in here that's not Arlie Ermy, who came back for this, a lot of that stuff and some of the goofier aspects of the story kind of drag this movie down. And I think that's the sad part. But there are good actors in here, like the biker guy, again, like Arlie Ermy, that made this super fun to watch, that made it super tense a lot of the time. The filmmaking aspect was really good. I think it fits very well. From Jonathan Liebsman, who directed this, it fits very well with the remake from 2003 that it's supposed to be a prequel to. I think it's got some good stuff in here. I think that the look of Leatherface is kind of a little debatable on whether it's good or bad. But most of the time he looks like shit. He looks like a wrestler, like a Kane type of wrestler, like I said in my review. But I don't hate the movie at all. And I was a little worried going back to this. I haven't watched this in a long time. I gotta tell you, I had a good time. I had a good time watching this again, just like I did with the remake this time around. Both are heavily dated. Like, heavily dated between the music that sucks and, like, I don't know. It feels very dated. If you grew up in the 2000s, or as me, I was born in the 90s, growing up and watching horror in the 2000s, like the Fog remake and stuff, this is very dated, and it feels like that. Not that it's not charming for people like me who grew up in that time. It won't be charming to people who've never seen this like it would be to somebody who grew up in the 80s, you know, and loves the charm of those kinds of things. It won't be like that for newer audiences. It feels kind of goofy and a little cheap in that regard because of the kind of music they use, how simple it seems. There are flaws like that in this movie, just like there are in the remake. But like I said, sometimes, depending on the day, I kind of flip back and forth on who I like more at the part 2, part 3 in my ranking, whether it be this or the remake. And I'll tell you, both pretty much match up very well. And again, they match each other the way they look. I will say this, though, just to go there. The ending of this film, the last, like, 5 minutes, are absolute bullshit, and there's no way it could have happened. Just gonna leave that right there and not spoil anything in case you haven't seen these movies. Moving along, though, to my number 2 pick. What's it gonna be? Is it gonna be the remake, or is it gonna be the original? I think it's very clear what it's probably gonna be. It's the remake from 2003. I've had this box set forever. This was the first one I ever saw. My mom saw it in the theaters, like I talked about in my review, and she saw it with her cousin, with our cousin, I guess, my second cousin, her first cousin, something like that. And she came back, and I think like 2 years after the film came out, like about 2005 or so, it was on TV, like Spike TV or something, FX, I don't know what it was on. But I watched it. My grandmother watched it with me, and we loved it. We thought it was really good. And again, like I said about the prequel to this from 2006, this movie has not aged tremendously well. There are really good elements to it, really good things. It's directed by Marcus Nispel, who did the Friday the 13th remake that I really like as well, or at least did. I haven't seen that in a while either. I don't know if it's going to hold up for me, but this, I think, was very well shot. Probably one of his better movies. It hasn't aged well, and the pacing is a little mixed on the film, but there are certain things in here, like the hitchhiker they pick up in the beginning, that I thought was great. Really great, honestly. There are so many good things in here. I think it's beautifully shot most of the time. I think the budget was very good for this film. The look of Leatherface I used to love, and the more I've watched it this time around, the more I'm like, it seems like a little bit of a letdown. I kind of think he looks like shit in this movie, just a little bit. But I don't know. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. The more I get certain shots as I watch the film, this time around, I would get shots that made me say that looks like shit, and then other shots it would be like, yeah, it's kind of in the dark, it looks better. You know, but I don't know. It reminds me of the Hobo Myers thing, but with Leatherface, which, you know. Anyway, not a bad film at all. A little cheap, little aged, you know. but it's good. It has a lot of gore, really good in that respect. I think that the beginning, the prequel, has more gore than this movie, if I'm thinking correctly. But the gore that was in here was pretty much always practical, and it looked amazing for that. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003 remake has a lot to offer if you haven't seen it before. It's just a little bit aged. It's been 20 years since this movie came out, dude. 20 years since the 2003 remake. Really let that settle in to your brain. That should tell you how much this has aged. 20 years. Anyway, now we're at number 1. I think you already know what that's going to be. The 1974 original classic that I don't even think is perfect. I have complaints about this film, but it is easily my highest rated, my highest beloved, I guess, of the entire series. I think it is super rewatchable every time you watch it, even though it's kind of a slow burn for a lot of the film, and I can't fucking stand the one brother in this film that's in the wheelchair named Franklin. I think he is awful. He irritates the shit out of me every time I watch it. But that mainly hit me this time, how much he annoys me. But I really enjoyed this. I think it's a great flick. I think it's a very well-made film, of course, directed and co-written by Tobe Hooper. And I think this is his best film, easily, for me. Leatherface is super scary. This is easily the best-looking Leatherface we've ever had in one of these movies. It's beautifully shot. The budget for the time was incredible. And when you see like something like this and Halloween side by side, 4 years apart, this had a bigger budget than that, if I had to bet on it. And it looks incredible for that. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1974 is a classic for a reason. There's barely any gore in the film. A lot of the violence is implied a lot of the time. And yet with that, it's very effective. It's something that will really stick with you, and it really won't let you go most of the time. It's a great flick. It's a very well-made movie. Not like the characters are super strong or anything. They're kind of bland, because that's what we had at that time. We didn't really have the subgenre yet, like I said, of slashers. And for what we had at that time with this movie was great. It was really great. We had this, we had Psycho, we had Homicidal from William Castle. There was a lot of good flicks around at that time that were kind of mimicking what this eventually perfected, I think, for the most part. But I will say this again, as much as I love the movie, as much as I think it's super incredible, and it doesn't even really have music, it focuses on sound effects, which really make it work. The ending, to this day, does not work for me. It's not satisfying. I think it's just a really lackluster ending for a film that probably should have been a standalone. But I would have preferred it to be a standalone with no remakes, no reboots, no requels, nothing like that. Especially no sequels, because the sequels it got are fucking garbage most of the time, until that remake, like I said. And yet, this has so much to offer, and it gets so much right in the film. This group, family, whatever, that are like cannibals, they kidnap people, mainly young people, and it's effective. It's very effective. The performances are really good. Again, Leatherface is incredible. It's a really good flick, and I recommend it on that, even if the ending is kind of unsatisfactory and Franklin irritates the shit out of me. For the most part, I really love the film. I think it has a lot going for it. I think it's a really good movie. But have you seen the original 74 film? I'd love to hear what you have to say about it down in the comment section down below. With that being said, that is my number 1 pick, as I said. Great flick. Deserves number 1. Always will be number 1. I don't think any of these movies will ever, in any future reference or context, will ever beat out this original movie for me or for many people. With that being said, that is my ranking list for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. These movies are heavily flawed. Most of them suck. Most of them are rated bland and average, and most of the time kind of unwatchable. There are moments of certain ones that are really solid, and a lot of them are just kind of forgettable. Like The Next Generation, like Part 3, like especially Part 2 that just is awful. Maybe it's not unforgettable because of how bad it is. I don't know. It's going to be one of those classic bad movies like Halloween Ends, in my opinion. Anyway, with all that being said, I really enjoyed making the video. I hope you guys had a good time watching the video, and I hope you have seen these movies. Because if I had to suffer, you deserve to suffer too. Anyway, what did you think about these movies? What would your ranking be? I'd love to see that down in the comment section down below for your thoughts on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films. Do you love them? Do you hate them? I started to make a video about the looks of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre himself, Leatherface, and kind of rank those out. And the more I thought about it, I was like, I don't want to, because most of them suck. I don't think I would be able to really define which ones I like more than others. Sometimes halfway through the films, he changes looks, like in Next Generation or in the beginning of the prequel from 2006. You know, these movies, he constantly changes his look. How would you even factor in something like the 2017 Leatherface film into this list? I mean, it would be kind of a mess, frankly. So I'm not going to do that video. I'm not. He doesn't deserve it like Michael Myers or Jason or Freddy do, even though Freddy typically looks the same every single movie too. But you know what I mean. Michael and Jason, I could understand ranking their looks, but otherwise, Leatherface, Freddy, probably not. Probably not even Chucky, for that matter. With all that being said, though, I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for watching the video once again. Thank you guys so much. Have a good weekend, or what's left of it, and God bless you guys. I wanted to save these reviews for summertime. I did them a little early. I wanted to get them out of the way because I want to do Sleepaway Camp. I want to do Friday the 13th if I have some time, too. And I kind of want to space the videos out a little bit. I'm not really sure if I'm going to do that or not, but we'll see. I might take a few days break and watch a couple of things over the week that are not a series of movies, not Sleepaway Camp, not Friday, whatever. I might do that for about a week. I don't know. We'll see what happens, what the schedule kind of opens up to be. But in the meantime, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for watching once again. God bless you all, and goodbye.